Please be advised, this podcast contains discussions and references to gun violence, murder, suicide, and governmental collapse, which could be potentially distressing or triggering for some listeners.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the official position or stance of the Life Midwest creators or any affiliated entities. The contents of this episode are left unadulterated in an attempt to capture how upset we are about gun violence in the U.S. The contents within should not be construed as professional advice, endorsement, or recommendation on any subject matter relating to the U.S. government, individual state governments, or their officials. Listeners are encouraged to critically engage with the content and conduct their own research to form their own opinions. Any reliance placed on the information presented in this podcast is strictly at the listener's own risk. We, the Life Midwest podcast, acknowledge several errors, omissions, and misrepresentations in our views expressed. We bear no responsibility for your actions. P.S. Wes is very sorry for acting a goddamned fool.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever you're tuning in from across the country and around the world, this is the Life Midwest podcast. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Join a Washington musician, a communications major, and an Army veteran, all originally from the Midwest, as we talk about life and events that are both current and events. I knew that we were going to do an episode like this eventually, and it's pretty sad that I knew that this eventually was going to come, because in the back of my mind, eventually this was going to happen again, and it was just going to be too much. The last straw. The time where this needed to be talked about. And if you're sick of hearing about it, maybe you're a part of the problem. I don't know. We'll talk about it today if you're a part of the problem. I got my boys with me today, and it's great that I don't have to monologue this one. Got our tight correspondent, Wes Shirley, everybody.
Howdy.
And Seattle's best. And maybe I mean the coffee, Lenny Wells. That was classy. I like that.
Gotta keep it kind of light a little bit, right?
You have to. You have to, especially when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And obviously, we're going to talk about what happened in Tennessee a couple weeks ago at this point, and why we think this continues to happen, and what we think the answer is. There's not. I don't think there's too much debate to it. Maybe we have some differentiating opinions on how we get this done, but I'm just. Normally I think this happens and I'm sad and I'm like, man, when is enough going to be enough? And then
it never is.
you just kind of get over it, I guess, after a couple of days. But this one is really, really stuck with me. And I don't know why. I don't know why there's nothing different about this one from the last few other than this was a female, which shouldn't and doesn't make a difference. But I'm saying, like, as far as like bad person wants gun, bad person gets gun, bad person uses gun to kill other people, innocent children in a school. That's what I'm saying. That's what I mean by there's nothing different about this. And so there's nothing to the point where there should be anything different about this, but it's just, I don't know. Without getting too impassioned right off the get-go, things need to change. And we're here to talk about that today. So, who would like to go first as far as how they're feeling, what we feel the changes need to be? Well, I guess I should start by saying this: if you live under a fucking rock, a person entered a private Christian school in Nashville, 28-year-old, and killed 3 children and 3 adults. They illegally bought 7 firearms, were hidden at home, and come to find out, actually, this came out this past Wednesday on CNN. Says that the school shooter was under care for emotional disorder and hid the guns at home. So obviously there's a mental health piece here, but yeah, Lenny, Wes, what do you guys have?
I feel like if anyone's been following the show and us more generally, especially like on Twitter, I feel like my opinions about this are pretty well known. But for those who aren't and maybe are just stumbling upon this, it's heartbreaking. Again, you know, it's heartbreaking it should be, I guess, heartbreaking for anyone to hear and to have this conversation about. But even more so, at least it is. I feel it's even more so for myself because I'm a parent, and it used to be that shootings like this, school shootings were like a freak not accident, but like a freak event. Something that we were all impacted by was Columbine, back in the way back, and things like that were so rare, they just never happened. And now it's like every 2-3 months, it's every other week. It seems like there's a mass shooting. It's like every month or two it happens out of school. So we're the only country in the world that has this problem. That isn't to say that gun violence isn't a problem in other places. It certainly is. But we're the only developed country in the world where your kids aren't safe at school from gun violence. Canada doesn't have this problem. Mexico doesn't have this problem. That isn't cartel related. This doesn't happen in the UK. This doesn't happen in Germany. This doesn't happen in France. This doesn't happen in Spain. This doesn't happen in the Nordic countries. This doesn't happen anywhere. This doesn't happen in the Baltics. I don't understand. Well, one, why it has to happen, and two, why seemingly the major response is to do nothing or to propose adding even more guns to the equation. It doesn't make any fucking sense to me. And we shouldn't have to, as parents and as a society, be scared to send our kids to school. I shouldn't have to worry that one of them might not come home. Yeah. Wes, what are your feelings or thoughts on the shit show that it is?
I'm not going to talk about gun control. I don't think that's the solution, actually. Although I don't think we should have, like, automatic rifles just willy-nilly in the public's hands. But I don't want to give power to the government to just come confiscate Americans' guns. Especially with the direction they're already going. Becoming fascist assholes. So I don't want that to happen. So, like, I don't know solutions, so I'm not much of a help here. I don't know the solution to the problem, but we can talk about the underlying issues that are causing civil unrest in this way. times are hard, and they've been hard for a long time. The three of us, we first lived through an unprecedented, once-in-a-lifetime economic disaster, the recession. I mean, our grandparents and great-grandparents lived through the Great Depression, but the recession wasn't too far off. And then we had 9/11 too when we were children. And that's that unprecedented terrorist attack on the U.S. We have the next economical situation in COVID. And then again, we're doing the inflation bullshit. So times are hard. Mental issues skyrocket when times are hard. What is a leading motivation or not motivation, but what is a leading cause of mental distress and duress? Economic crisis, economic problems, not being provided what you need at the bottom. We have Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If your needs aren't met, you start finding them elsewhere. You start finding them in ways that are unconventional. Okay, I'm pissed off. I don't have what I need. If I can't live right, no one else can live right. I'm just going to fucking shoot people up. I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying I can understand that. With a little bit of empathy, these people we call monsters, these bad, bad men, or bad women in this case, they're doing things because they're put to a limit. Most people aren't just walking around as fucking deviants. I forget what the law is called, but it's like only 0.01% of the population are true deviants. Psychopaths, people with antisocial personality disorder, people who want to actually watch people suffer. We don't really have a bunch of that. That's kind of a myth that they're just out there walking around. It's other motivations, other factors that are causing these issues. Our government's practically collapsing. I feel like we're living through the fall of Rome 2.0, right? We're defunding public schools, trying to privatize them. We're defunding libraries, trying to privatize them. We're defunding the fucking post office, trying to privatize it. The postal workers this week just took a huge fucking pay cut. There's a reason it's called going postal. Wait till they start shooting shit up, right? Inflation's out of control. Price gouging's out of control. We live in a second Gilded Age where union busting is rampant and people are just fucking losing their sense of security, losing their sense of pride, losing anything that makes them feel secure within a country. No fucking wonder people are getting shot up. Can you blame people when they're pushed to the limit and they just want to do harm to others? I mean, yeah, you can blame them. I'm not saying that's right. But with a little bit of empathy, we can see why it's happening. This country, I'm in Thailand, so not this country, but your country, the place I'm from, the U.S. where you guys live right now is a fucking piece of shit. It's a fucking hellhole. That place can burn in hell. And it's not because of the people. I think the people are wonderful. A bit racist, but in aggregate, in whole. But the government is just an absolute fucking flaming pile of shit. Right? And I'm not going to take that back ever. I don't care. This is going live, and that's how I feel about the U.S. government. We're turning into fascist. We have a super conservative, borderline fascist Supreme Court. They're stripping rights from laborers. They're stripping rights from women. What the fuck? Yeah, now it's a woman shooter. I wonder fucking why. No, fuck the USA. And the reason people are getting shot in their schools is because it's a shit country. That's what I got. I'm not going to elaborate.
I think it's interesting what you bring up though is there's a big piece of what you're saying that has to do with mental health, right? And the reaction to the way that their environment is. But the conservatives and the conservative defense and argument is they say that it's a mental health issue, right? But they're not willing to do anything about it. They're not willing to fund mental health. They're not willing to believe in mental health. Many people who are conservative and on the right do not believe that mental health or mental health care is a real thing. And that's incredibly unfortunate. And I think even if you were to word for word agree with what Wes just said, there's still the problem that the right, if they were to agree with what Wes just said, they're not willing to fund the solution to be a part of the solution.
I want to interject there. The left isn't either. The left are just as stupid. They're just as incompetent. They're just as dumb. I mean, we have a few good ones, right? We have Bernie Sanders. We have AOC. Oh, I guess Elizabeth Warren. We have some really good people, and I feel bad that I'm not mentioning the names of the ones I can't think of their name right now, because there's a good handful of them, and they are really trying to fight to use our tax dollars to come back to us, the people. They're trying to make a government in the image for the people. And I feel really bad that they're so overshadowed by just dumb fucking idiots that all they do is they sit in office for years on end collecting lobbying dollars from giant corporations whose only intent is to fucking destabilize the country, take the power away from the average working American, and then turn us into their serfs. And that's the left too. Fuck Joe Biden, fuck the Biden administration, fuck all Democratic congressmen, senators, people who aren't fucking willing to fight for the people. They're worthless, they're shit, they're scum, fuck them. Am I radical yet?
I mean, whether someone thinks you are or aren't, I'm equally disappointed in Joe Biden in his response to this. I've been incredibly frustrated with the Biden administration and the lack of response to this, and all of the shootings that have happened since he's taken office. By no means am I sitting here saying that it's 100% the Republicans' fault. I'm just saying the typical conservative argument is that they'll say, "Oh, it's a mental health issue," but they're not. They're the last in line when it comes to funding mental health or mental health care.
I agree. I would say, as a whole, the left side of our government would say mental health is somewhat important. But how many opportunities have they just fucking slid past to do stuff? How many times could we have alleviated any amount of economic problems that the U.S. people are facing if the Biden administration pushed through an executive order to, let's say, all right, we're not even going to listen to what you guys are saying about pushing back education debt relief. We're just going to put it through. Oh, you're not going to raise the debt ceiling? Okay, we're just going to print $1 trillion coin. That's completely within our ability. We're just not going to appease you idiots. They don't do that. They sit there and appease the idiots, and then they become the idiots themselves.
Well said. Well said. Couldn't agree more. Lenny?
I think you're fundamentally wrong on one thing, and that's just that guns are the problem. When Christchurch happened in Australia, Australia immediately passed a weapons ban. It wasn't just assault weapons; it was a total gun ban.
New Zealand.
Point is that when this school shooting happened, there was then action to remove guns from the situation. And now, when you could argue that, for example, our neighbors to the north, Canada, they're going through some of the exact same economic hardships that the U.S. is facing. Australia, where this gun ban happened, they're going through even worse, especially if you just look at gross GDP, right? And their rate of inflation. They're going through an even worse economic time, and their government is arguably as fascist as ours is right now, if not more so. But people still aren't doing this. Guns are the problem. Then I'm not saying that there needs to be a gun ban, but I do believe that there needs to be more strict gun control measures. I've not made this like a secret about myself. I own guns. I've trained with guns. I know how to use guns, and I consider myself, one of the good gun owners, right? But even if it were to come to like policy where like I lost my guns for whatever reason, then that's fine with me. Because it doesn't matter what anybody says that wants to debate this point. The Second Amendment exists in the U.S. Constitution as it does because it was meant as a provision for the people to rise against their government should it become tyrannical. That's not going to happen now. It just can't, right? The U.S. government, the U.S. Army, the armed forces in general, whether it be at the federal or state level in the National Guard, control an arsenal that will put down just about anything. And we've seen it happen. I've been part of it, right? It doesn't matter how many AR-15s you have. It doesn't matter. You could own a sizable arsenal of any type of weapon, and you're just gonna get drone striked to hell. So, if people want to keep guns that are bolt action, something that is specifically designed to hunt big game or small game, that's fine. Assault rifles like AR-15s, high capacity magazines are a problem. I don't understand why that's controversial. Because it isn't to me. Shit, when I was in the army, weapon access was super tightly controlled. Like, not only so, first and foremost, for anybody that doesn't know, when you're in the military and you get issued a weapon, it's issued to you more like in theory than practice, because what happens is you get assigned a weapon with a serial number. That then, once you identify that all the parts are there and it's in working order, you give it to an armorer who then puts it behind two very thick locked doors into a cage with a very thick lock and a very thick chain, and is essentially all but bomb proof. So they're not just walking around with weapons. It's all very strictly controlled. And most of the time, the only weapon accidents that happen are when people live off post, or even sometimes on post when they have weapons that they're not supposed to have. Right? Because if you live on, like, for example, when I lived in a barracks room, if I bought a weapon, it had to be stored in that same arms room where all the issued weapons were, where all those went. So the only time weapon accidents happen is when they were privately bought, not disclosed to chain of command, and existed in a barracks room or off post, like if somebody was married or they were high enough rank where they didn't have to live in the barracks. Or so it was that exact scenario, or one other ones where someone was mentally ill. And we could do a whole episode about the way mental illness is treated in the military. Someone who was mentally ill snapped and then committed a friendly fire incident. But those are so incredibly rare, like rarer than just about any other kind of gun violence there is. So I know firsthand that heavy regulation with gun work. So I mean, there's that. I mean, I don't know what other evidence people need to show that heavy that show that. And to say that, like, I don't know, I'm gonna get real deep and passionate about something, so I don't know if anybody else wants to say something or if we want to go to a break, but anyways, that's where I'm at.
I would like to say something. I'm glad you hit on all of that, because I didn't want to, right? Like, I want to talk about the underlying issues, and what you said is completely right as far as I'm aware. Obviously, I don't know anything about the military side, but yeah, gun control works. Australia did ban guns, I believe, in the 90s after a mass shooting. New Zealand did ban guns after Christchurch. And the whole thing about Canada not, shooting up schools or whatever, they do like have a significantly smaller population that, like 40 million at most, maybe 30 million. But they're allowed to strike, and they are organizing to strike. Whereas in the US, they're doing strike busting. I'm not saying that labor rights are a direct cause for mass shootings, especially since, we've had mass shootings before that. But there's a lot more outlets in other places for, like, and I don't even know how I want to say this, or how I want to say this factually, because I don't have the full, I might just cut that out. But no, I agree entirely with what you're saying. Gun control is an issue. It needs to happen. But even if we control guns, and I don't want to, like, hammer in, like, the conservative talking points, or like the NRA fed talking points, because that's not what I'm about. But if we throw all of that aside, let's just throw guns out of the equation, which I know you can't. That's kind of what my argument was, is all the issues that we're going to still have issues. I mean, people that don't have guns have like mass knife attacks. When I lived in Japan, that happened. You don't hear about it because do you even get Japanese news in the US unless it's about like anime or card games or something that's in your interest? And then here in Thailand, they've had a shooting event since I've been here, as well as a stabbing event. It happens around the world. You just don't hear about it in the U.S. because we have so much shit going on, and we live in our own bubble anyways. But places where they did outlaw guns, you don't have fucking mass shootings. And Thailand's kind of like the U.S. in the fact that all citizens can own guns.
My entire point is basically that I'm not ignorant of the fact that mass shootings happen outside of the U.S., right? That is true. But my point is that how often does it happen at a school? And how often just does it happen in general? There's always going to be, just by law of averages, a mass shooting somewhere, right? Out in the U.S. or not. But the problem is that the frequency inside the U.S. far outpaces anywhere else in the world.
Oh, definitely. By orders of magnitude.
And I think that this is one of those situations where you can't or don't necessarily need to use the rest of the world as a benchmark to determine how bad something is, because it's one time is too many, right? And so if you have something happening repeatedly, it's obviously an issue. And that's not to dissolve anything that what you guys are talking about or saying. But at the same time, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, if, like Lenny, you brought up hunting as a point. Let me just say this. When you hunt for two reasons, either for sport or for, I don't know, deer stew, whatever, right? But like when you use an AR-15, there is nothing left of that animal. When you use an AR-15, there is nothing left of that child. That is not meant to kill someone. It is meant to destroy someone. And I think that's the main difference, that even if you're a gun owner, even if you are defending the ability to own guns, even if you're a listener who defends the ability to own guns, nobody needs something that destroys someone. We're not taking a break today, by the way.
Okay, so I don't want to be like nitpicky, but I think as the person that has the most experience with guns, I have the responsibility to be nitpicky. So AR-15 style weapons are deadly, yes, but not to the extent that you're making them out to be. What you're thinking of would be more akin to like a 50 caliber round. AR-15s shoot a 5.56 equivalent round, which is about maybe an inch or two big.
Okay.
And what a lot of times what we see is that when someone has been disfigured, radically disfigured by weapons, is that it's not a single round that's doing that. It's not a single shot. That's like something like if you were to just like lay into like one target repeatedly, or you see there's a reason people tend to use, this is going to be kind of graphic and triggering for, I'm sure, some people out there, so maybe we should put a trigger warning at the start of this episode. But the reason people tend to suicide themselves with it when it comes to guns is with a shotgun, because it's much more immediate damage over a larger area, whereas a lot of times, so long as you're not shot straight directly in the heart or the skull, in your cranium, you can survive an AR-15 shot. That isn't to take away from your point, and I don't mean to, but you are correct in the sense that AR-15s are designed as a weapon against people and not, let's say, less sentient animals. Like for anything that somebody would possibly be hunting. Because even those rifles use a larger caliber round and great. That's not the point. So I just AR-15s and anything of similar design is 100% meant to be used against people. That's why they're sold for quote home defense. That's why the military currently uses an AR style rifle for waging war. So I just feel like that needed to be said, because if we don't correct ourselves, someone's going to correct us for us.
Speaking of use against people, I say we just trade all of our guns for guillotines. Like, the problem's obviously at the top. I mean, we get rid of all the guns, trade them for guillotines, and then it's no longer call your senators. It's send them a picture of a guillotine when they don't listen.
Well, I don't disagree that there is an economic factor to this. There is some other.
It's a governmental factor.
Well, there's a lot of factors that go into why somebody would do these things. And I don't want to feel like I don't want anybody to get the belief that I'm discounting that fact. But when it comes to the question of where do you start, policy can only happen so quickly. Even if like we did like a mass overhaul and replace everybody, in positions of power with people that were idealistically aligned with like our own personal line of thinking, whatever that may be, it's never going to happen overnight. But what, in my mind, one of the things that could happen or have an impact faster, or the fastest, I guess, would be gun control. Actually, putting in measures to control the weapons. Like a really good one is unfortunately shown to us with the event that started this discussion. Tennessee, the individual was, as Kevin shared with us at the top of the show, was being treated for emotional distress. So if Tennessee has a law in the books that says, that just flags a registry, right? So like if someone's being treated for emotional distress, their therapist puts it down in a registry, and now anytime someone goes to buy a gun, their name and information is cross-checked by that registry. Oh, well, you can't right now because X, Y, and Z is happening until a doctor feels that you're no longer a danger to yourself or others. They call them red flag laws. I don't see, and a red flag law could easily prevented this tragedy.
Is that like is that a federal red flag law or
no? Red flag laws are state.
So I just go to like West Virginia and buy a gun, and then unless I get pulled over at the border or whatever, who has borders in between states, like I'm sure they're there, but like we don't have like an international level border with border control, like. Just go to a different state, buy the guns. They're doing that. They're stashing them anyways. My issue, the reason I want to go to the root problem is I agree with everything you're saying. I don't want you to think I'm attacking everything you say, but we can't even get the government to do a single thing we want, let alone this massive overhaul that involves the people in the government losing all their nice donor bucks from the gun associations internationally. So there's all these workarounds are going to be not only encouraged by the gun cartel in the U.S. lobbyists. It goes deeper than lobbyists though. Like there's propagandists, there's people who are literally like pushing events to happen, people who are putting up gun shows just over border lines so people can get the guns in their state they're not allowed to have. I've witnessed this in the Michigan-Ohio border. They will do gun shows right on the border. That way people can come from like Indiana and Ohio to get to Michigan so they can buy these guns without ever being background checked. It just happens. And the people are, we can put all these laws into place, but until we actually get some type of coherent structure set up, nothing's going to work. But they're going to use that as a scapegoat to see we put these laws in place and shit's still happening. I guess there's just nothing we can do about it.
But what the issue comes back to being able to do something now versus trying to do something that'll never actually happen. So again, the same exact argument you have for not trying to go down the gun control route could be said for the idea of implementing anything that has to do with mental health care at the federal level, anything that has to do with economic relief at the federal level, or any level for that matter. But when it comes to gun control and creating, like just red flag laws in general, they're immediate and something can be happen right now and do exist in the country right now. Whereas the economic problem is a much more systemic issue that hasn't been solved in our lifetimes. So why would we focus on that as the immediate action when it is the immediate action, but it's still nothing's happening?
So I don't want you to think that the economic is the main thing. That was one one of the points that I touched on a little bit more, but that's just one of the problems. Obviously, fixing the economic situation isn't going to help everything. It all is systemic, including the gun issues. I'm just saying we can put all these little gun implementations into place immediately, and it won't have much of an effect unless we're doing the other thing as well. Yeah, sure, put gun control in immediately, but also start working on other stuff, or that gun control is not going to work. It's just going to be some more jiggling around papers and waving hands and then school shootings again. And I don't want to see that happen because that's what we've been doing. States have been putting red flag laws into place, and the government has been doing like checkpoints, but it's so little and it's so far in between. And if getting all 50 states to do anything is damn near impossible. I guess we only need to worry about 48 of them, right? Like 2 of them are so far out, they're not gonna, whatever. They should have gun control too. But like as far as the gun trafficking throughout the country, if you set it up in one state, they're just gonna go to another state and nothing's gonna be done about it. And if you want a gun, you're going to get the gun. And I know I hate that argument too, because that's what they all say. We can't ban guns because they'll just bring them up from Mexico. If you want them, the bad guys are gonna get the guns. But it is true. They are going to get the guns, and it's made easy throughout the country, regardless of if a state here and there puts into laws. I get what you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying, but there's just so much more to the shit show. I honestly, and the reason I wanted to talk about the government being the problem is this issue is not going to be fixed. It's just not going to. I don't see hope at the end of the tunnel for gun control in the U.S. because of how fucked up our federal government is and how our state governments, not all of them, obviously, some of them work really well, but most of them are just a shit show. It's because of how our country's structured. It's because of how willingly the people eat propaganda. The people with kids in school who have the most to learn, obviously not all of them, I am generalizing, but keep that in mind that I am in fact generalizing, will sit there and say, I think my son should have a gun in school, that'll keep him safe. They eat the propaganda just fucking wholesale, and then they spew the hatred back out, and then nothing gets done. And it's because they're allowed to do that. Lobbyists and propagandists are allowed to run wild in our country. Same way as robber barons are allowed to run wild and steal all the money. Like, people at the top are just allowed to do whatever the fuck they want. There's an imbalance in power, and the gun control issue, just like the economic issue, just like everything else, won't be fixed until there's some type of bloodshed, or some type of collapse, or some type of fucking disaster beyond repair.
Well, I think that's where you're wrong, Wes, because the bloodshed is happening, and it's happening in schools, and that still has not prompted the action that you think it should.
That's so small scale to what I'm thinking of, though. I know it's a lot, and I know it sucks, and on a global scale, it's absolutely mind-boggling, but like, what's going to happen until the poor are going to eat the rich, or they're going to become slaves? Like, And in between people, there's going to be these random acts of violence all over breaking out because society's collapsing. I didn't want to do this episode, not because I know we're all playing the devil's advocate with each other, and I'm sorry. I hope I'm not like making you think that what you're saying I actually disagree with. I do agree with it all. But it's such a fucked issue. I can't we could have an episode like this every week. It could be the gun control or the gun crisis Midwest. And it would still never get fixed, and we would still never agree on what action needs to happen because the whole thing is just a fucking shit show. The amount of pessimistic nihilism that runs in our country that creates these random acts of violence isn't just because people have mental health problems. The mental health problems are exacerbated by all the compounding factors that make it just so hopeless for everyone. Why should I do anything to be better? Remember, we talked about Bylon. Our version of Bylon in the U.S. is shoot up a school, unfortunately. We don't talk in any other way. We don't fight with our words. There are some of us, right? We're fighting with our words on the internet. We don't look at fucking France. They raised the retirement age by 2 years, and the whole fucking country's on fire, and everyone's protesting, and they're singing their national anthem everywhere in public, which is basically drink the blood of the rich or the corrupt, which is glorious. Meanwhile, Canada's organizing to strike at any given time for any reason because that's their fucking God-given right to not be oppressed and turned into serfs by the elite. In America, we're just like, well, I guess there's no recourse for us getting fucked in the ass continually. And then eventually someone fucking snaps and shoots up a school or shoots up a park or shoots up a theater or whatever. I have no hope. I'm a nihilist. I have guns. I love guns. I love fucking murdering people. That's getting put into a supercut. I don't know. My opinion is, while gun control needs to happen, I think talking about it is just so worthless in our country. Because I'm also a nihilist.
You're right about one thing. If there's one thing the French love to do, it's protest and set their country on fire.
I want to be like them.
They're really good at it.
We need to do that.
Kevin, I really don't know if you have anything else to say on this, because I feel like Wes and I have really just kind of snowballed and taken this thing for a ride.
Here's my closing thoughts before we go to the shoutouts. The goal of this episode was to start a conversation, or at least get you thinking about different approaches or different responses to the solution. Different from what you might hear from the Jon Stewarts and the Trevor Noahs of the world. Different from what you might hear from the Tucker Carlsons of the world. Who are going to have their own sides and make the typical arguments that you would expect them to make. But at the same time, something needs to happen. I don't care whether you're on Lenny's viewpoint, Wes's viewpoint, a little bit of both, or the Tucker Carlsons or the Trevor Noahs of the world. Something needs to fucking happen. I'm fucking sick of talking about this and having this conversation with myself, with other people. Oh, it's a horrible thing, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's a horrible fucking thing. And typically you do something about horrible fucking things. But because we live in a nihilistic society of what, like Wes was talking about, and because we live in a lawless country, like how Lenny's talking about, we have this compound fuckery of things going on. It's like how a tornado was formed almost. You have these two different systems with two different pressures of air. I'm not going to explain how fucking tornadoes work in a gun episode, okay? The point is that something needs to happen. You can't disagree with that. Something needs to happen. Things cannot stay the way that they are. It is unsustainable. And if you disagree, you are a part of the problem. Hard stop, mic drop, whatever. Something needs to happen. Lenny, I'm going to kick it over to you for the shoutouts.
Oh boy. First and foremost, I'm shouting out my wonderful wife, Brittany. I want to shout out my kids, who I love very much. And just even the thought of just something nebulously bad happening to them like sends me spiraling. So shout out to them and to their safety. Wes, I want to shout you out today. I think we had a really good discourse going, and I don't think that you're a horrible person, and I understand what you were trying to do and what your viewpoints were. So hopefully you haven't gotten it twisted. Hopefully our listeners haven't gotten it twisted. Kevin, I want to shout you out as well. It was really, even though this isn't an episode that maybe we wanted to do, it is at least conversation that I think we all needed to have. And I think it's a conversation everybody should be having with themselves. You're 100% right. If you don't think something needs to change, you are the problem. Like I said on Twitter, our hearts go out to everybody that was affected in Tennessee, and we hope that something changes sooner rather than later. Wes?
Shout out to all of the victims of senseless act of violence, mass shootings, given the time periods, especially those in Tennessee, but also just everyone everywhere. It's such a waste of life, a waste of potential, a waste of energy, a waste of endless discourse on a problem that never gets solved. Shout out to you, Lenny. I'm sorry for hardcore playing devil's advocate. I can't say I don't agree with a lot of what I said, but I think I took it a bit extreme. And thank you for bringing any amount of reason into that. Shout out to you, Kevin. I'm sorry we kind of hijacked your ideal of an episode and ran it into somewhat of a... I don't know. I think it'll be a productive episode overall, but it's probably not what you're expecting. Shout out to both of you for also sitting through, anything I said.
Another Marxist rant.
Dude, I'm a Marxist. I'm sorry. He doesn't talk about this nebulous red communism. He literally just talks about the imbalance in labor rights and capitalism. He coined the word capitalism. The reason we use that word is because of him. He a brilliant man. You should read the Communist Manifesto. Shout out to Karl Marx, head of his time. Anyways, also anti-shout out to the entire U.S. government, excluding a few people who are actually trying to make a difference. Anti-shout out to most of the state governments. Y'all a bunch of idiots. Me on my ivory tower. Fuck you, dumbasses. Shout out to, or anti-shout out to anyone who thinks shooting up a school's the answer. Go fuck yourself. And no, that's so... Seek help. Don't fuck yourself. Seek help. Yeah. I'm gonna go take my manic pills. Kevin?
Want to shout out my beautiful and amazing future wife, Ashley. I want to shout out the kids and the adults and the families of those kids and adults who were affected by the recent tragedy. I don't have kids yet, but I would live every day in fear if I was a parent. So, Lenny, I really wholeheartedly sympathize. I can't say that I empathize, but sympathize with your shout out. I want to shout out anyone who is at least having a conversation about something changing. You are not a part of the problem. Congratulations. It's you. Hi. It's not the problem. It's you. I just... If you're trying to do something, if you're trying to talk about something, if you're trying to get someone to open up their eyes to a different viewpoint, good for you. Keep doing that. Have that conversation at the dinner table or at the coffee table or at any table. Or there doesn't even need to be a fucking table. Draw one. I don't fucking care. Andy, shout out, of course, to those who think that, I think Lenny brought up a very good point about the Second Amendment and drone strikes, and I'm too tired to sum up what he said, but just go back and listen to the episode if you somehow made it this far and didn't listen to what Lenny said. Folks, I think it's really important to keep in mind here that this is a discussion show and we're not the news, and we're not here to tell you how to think, but at the same time, I think there's a pretty universal compass on this that, whether you are a part of what Wes says or what Lenny says or both, is it the way that I thought the episode was going to go? No, but we don't run on a script, and here's your proof. Congratulations. So, folks, leave us a review on your favorite listening platform. Tell us what you think. Chime in on our social media platforms at The Life Midwest. Write us an email at support@thelifemidwest.com. Check out our website at thelifemidwest.com. And if you do go on to any of our major social platforms, you'd be interacting with our social media manager, Lenny, and touch on what he said or get with him on your thoughts. We definitely appreciate the interaction and getting your thoughts on this, especially a heavier topic like this. We're going to kind of continue with a somewhat... No, not really. I don't think it's going to end up being a heavy topic, but next week we're going to be back with celebrating the 20th anniversary of Linkin Park's Meteora album. It actually comes out and drops pretty soon here, and it'll be giving us a few days to listen to it and then sit here and talk about it. So I'm looking forward to that. Obviously, we miss Chester Bennington very much. I think the three of us do as big Linkin Park fans, but so we'll be back next week with that. In the meantime, call your mom, tell someone you love them, because unfortunately in the United States, you never know when gun violence is going to take them away. So I'll go ahead and leave that there. Folks, we'll be back next Saturday and every Saturday here on the Life Midwest podcast. Take care. Have a good one.
Deuces.
Bye. Love you, babies. Also, fuck the NRA.
Yeah, I wish I would have remembered to anti-shout them out.
Did you stop recording already?
Still recording. I can splice this
okay.
in.
Yeah, you can leave that in.
Super fuck the NRA. In their asses.
Anyways, love you guys.